Okay, brethren, I have two messages today. I really wanted to finish the sins of Saddam, but I'm going to put the other message first. We may not get to the sins of Saddam. I think it's really important that we know what's going on in the country and in the world today. And I found this article online. I would like to share it with you. I had to study quite a bit to understand it myself. I believe I understand enough to explain it to you, and I will do the best that I can. I go to this website. The website is called What Does It Mean? And it comes out of Ireland. The news is pretty. The news is pretty raw. You know, sometimes news is upsetting, and it's just raw and hard-hitting. In other words, she doesn't sugarcoat it at all. I've noticed that a couple of other channels that I listen to that are conservative channels, actually, the material that they use comes from this site, and they break it down for the people. So I believe it's a reliable site. But of course, other people's information can be wrong, but I think it's one of the most accurate sites on the web. Accurate insofar as information, brethren. I don't need you giving me your opinion. I want to know what's going on in the world. So, I reproduced an article for you. It's Exhibit 1, the TRIFFIN Dilemma. The name of the message is the TRIFFIN Dilemma, and it says Exhibit 1. Okay. And this is the Exhibit 1 is the article. I took it right off of her website. She says it's all right as long as you give her credit for it. You can copy her articles. So I am going to go over this article with you and try to help you understand what's happening, because we've been hearing, and then also I have my own notes that I wrote down as I was learning the subject myself, and that's your message number 935, Part 1. Those are my notes that I took. And I also gave you an Exhibit 2, which explains reserve currency to you, because the United States dollar is a global world currency, global reserve currency. So if you want to read that. And then I also gave you a printout on blockchain, which is very interesting. I've been curious about blockchain for a long time. This is Exhibit 4. So this really was edifying to me. And the reason that blockchain is important, is there an Exhibit 3 somewhere? This is 2, 1. There must be an Exhibit 3 somewhere. Let me see what I have here. This is the season. Is there an Exhibit 3, Susan? Did I miss that?
Yeah, that should be an Exhibit 3.
It's 4, 2, notes. I have two sets of notes here. Message 935, Part 1.
2 sets.
And I don't have an Exhibit 3. 1, 4, 2.
Done. Okay. Okay, I can go grab.
Okay. I don't have it. This is 2. I have 2 Part 1s here.
Yes, I thought I lost one. I'll grab this. You need Exhibit
3.
Weird. Okay.
So, yeah, the reason that blockchain is, I didn't understand it, you know, but now I think at least I understand it enough for me. Okay, I have a surface understanding of it. And the blockchain is, it's a computer. It's digital. Blockchain is digital, and I don't know that I should be explaining this first to you. It's a digital ledger system. I just want to make it very simple for you, and then you can study it more deeply if you want to. We have a picture of it here for you. It's called blockchain technology, and it's a financial technology that is tied to cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is a form of digital money. Cryptocurrency is a form of digital money, and it has no value. Like for instance, national currencies, including the dollar, are supposed to be backed up by gold, and were at one time backed up by gold. $1 bill is worth so much of an ounce of gold. The problem that the dollar is, and the reason the dollar is in trouble right now, is that President Nixon took us off the gold standard. So it's no longer true that every dollar bill that you have is worth any amount of gold at all. As a matter of fact, it's not backed up by any amount of gold at all. So the American dollars today are what's called a fiat currency. It's not backed up by any precious metal. And that's why we're in trouble. So Exhibit 3 is the explanation of the, oh, this was an important one too, the TRIFFIN dilemma. This is a definition of the TRIFFIN dilemma. So let me just finish with a brief explanation of the blockchain. Okay, the blockchain technology, let's see, and we'll just leave you with this. There's no page number here, but it's almost to the end of your document. You could see these 4 images here. You can see these 4 images. The one over here, this represents individual computers. Okay. This one is an individual computer. The one next to it starts showing a network, computers connecting on a network. Okay. Now, when you have a network, when you have a computer network, there's always a base, okay, a foundational base of the network, and then other computers connect into it, so that that base or the server can be hacked, can be corrupted, and then it throws the whole system off. But with blockchain, there is no base, there is no server. Every computer exists completely independent by itself and has all of the data on it. It's the technology that makes this possible. Every computer has all of the data on it. So it's not possible to hack or alter the server. And it's very hard to cheat because everybody has a duplicate of all of the financial information. So you would have to hack hundreds of thousands of millions of computers to hack in and put it and change the information and run a scam. Okay, it's like virtually impossible to do it. Okay. So this is the blockchain here. It's a network, and every computer is independent. Every computer is independent, and the digital technology updates the entire blockchain every 10 minutes. So it's a financially secure system. And the value of it is that it does away with the need for central banks. And it's this, every nation has a central bank today. And it's the central banks that are really, they're really draining the finances of all of the nations. And we're coming to a global financial crisis, largely because of the interest charged by the central banks. And I'll get into more of that later. So this blockchain technology does away with the need of the central banks, does away with interest, okay, and it gives independence into the hands of the individual. And there's something unique about the blockchain system that, and they used Facebook and Twitter as an example of it. the more people that, every person that joins this blockchain system, they become another block in the atom. Okay, they become another block. They become another computer in the system. And the more people that join it, the stronger that it gets. It's not, it's like Facebook or Twitter. You don't get any money for joining it. It's just a phenomenon that happens, that the more people that join it and use it and enjoy it, it just gets very strong. And that's what's happened to Facebook. It's gotten very strong. They haven't paid anybody to join it. The people join it because it benefits the individual. And Facebook has become very powerful. So Russia, I'm making this political, Russia has a blockchain financial technology. Every nation, to do business with other nations, has to have a method to deal with Russian rubles, want to deal with the American dollar or the Chinese yen. Okay, how do you deal when you're in Russia and you have Russian rubles? How do you do business with the Chinese yen? You need a system that will exchange the currency, that will make a decision, is that 1 ruble is worth so many yen, or so many yen is worth 1 ruble. So Russia has developed a digital blockchain system that is virtually unhackable, virtually uncorruptible, without interest, and more people are joining it because it's such a good system. It is becoming a very powerful source of economic dealings in the world. Okay, so that is what blockchain is. And that is Russia's ace in the hole, you might say, for attracting other nations to do financial business through Russia. Okay. As I understand it, Russia no longer has a central bank. Now, I've spoken to you over the years, very little though, I think, about central banks and the banking systems. There are pox on society. They're spiritually and economically dirty, in my opinion. Our president, Andrew Jackson, closed the central bank. Our founding fathers warned us to not get involved with the central bank. What? Central banks charge interest, and when you have to pay interest, it turns into debt. That's what's wrong with America right now. We owe so much money that the interest on the debt is all that we can afford to pay. So it's impossible, we will never ever pay off the debt. How did that happen? The central bank, who do we owe the interest to? The central bank. And the central bank in the United States of America is the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve Bank. The Federal Reserve Bank is a private corporation that prints our money for us. And there's absolutely no reason that we should have a private bank printing our money for us, except that we were sold down the river by our own Congress. That's what's going on in this country right now, brethren. We have been sold. You hear a lot about African witch doctors selling their own people into slavery. Well, our own government has sold its citizens into slavery, debt slavery, economic slavery. And the whole world is boiling and bubbling. The whole idea of what is this TRIFFIN dilemma? It's an economic explanation of what's going on today. And as expressed as a mathematical formula, which says the way this situation is now, the next step that's going to happen, because we're in this TRIFFIN dilemma. We have interest that we can't pay the debt back, and I'm going to go into this in more detail right now. The only way out is World War III. So we're one step away from World War III. If you hear all these pundits coming online telling you the crash of the dollar, okay, World War III coming, I hope today to give you some information that will help you to understand what's happening better, and then we can ask the Lord how to pray. But we should understand whatever's going to happen, we should understand what's happening. I think God wants his people educated. So the TRIFFIN dilemma is a mathematical expression of the economic troubles that we have today. President Trump has talked a lot about trade deficits, and he's put tariffs on foreign nations. And why are there forces in this country that are so against President Trump? What is he doing? He's completely overhauling, he's headed towards completely overhauling the system of the global way of doing business. So, since World War II, brethren, the United States dollar has been the global reserve currency. What does that mean? All nations agree that they exchange their currency into dollars, and they do business with dollars. They take their currency, go to their local bank, give their local bank their currency, the Italian lira, the English pound, give it to their bank and get dollars back, and then they can do business with any other country in Europe, Asia, or the United States using dollars. Now the banks charge interest to do this. And in addition to that, if you are the global reserve currency, that means that the United States Bank has to have a lot of extra dollars on hand, because all of these people are coming to buy. They're literally buying dollars from us. Now, we used to be on a gold standard, but it's not too practical doing business across national lines and exchanging gold, which is heavy and heavy weight, and all the other problems associated with actually using a metal form of currency. So when we first started doing this, and I was interested, found it very interesting to find out why President Roosevelt had confiscated all the gold from the people in America. You see, I hear all these little bits of information and you don't understand why things happen. I had heard that President Roosevelt, at the end of World War II, had demanded and made it a law that every private citizen that owned gold had to turn it into the United States government. I think they got some kind of a stipend back for it. I don't know if they got the full worth of it or not. But if you didn't turn it in, and they called you could go to jail for 20 years. They made it a felony. Why would the president do that? Because after the end of World War II, all of the nations got together, the nations of Europe anyway. Was Asia involved? I'm not sure. Japan was involved. And they decided that the United States dollar would be the global currency, and it would be backed by gold. So President Roosevelt collected the gold from everybody, every citizen, and then he lowered its worth. I said, I'm going to make a standard worth. Every dollar an ounce of gold is worth $25. I think it was $25. And every dollar is worth one fraction of that $25. So other countries that wanted to do business with us knew that amount was used to calculate the exchange rate of their currency for a dollar. Now, in order for that to happen, the Federal Reserve the Central Bank of America had to have a lot of surplus of dollars, because all these other nations were coming and selling us their money for dollars. So all of this involved the central banks getting involved with the exchanges, charging interest, and charging interest. Then in addition to that, and this is what President Trump is dealing with right now, the other nations that wanting to do business through American dollars, in order for them to make a profit, they had to undersell American products, because excuse me. Because the nation that has the reserve currency, it sounds like they're having the advantage. We don't have to pay any money to exchange our currency into dollars. We already have the dollars. So the dollar is worth more to the American citizen than the dollar is worth to the, let's say, the British citizen. Let's say Britain takes their pound and they exchange, and this is probably way off, they get 5 pounds for $1, which I know is completely inaccurate. Okay, then they take these dollars back, and they've already been discounted. They have to pay a price, a commission, or a commission to the central bank for the exchange. So the dollar, or the $10 that's owned by Britain, has less value than the dollar owned by American citizens because the dollar is ours. But the British had to pay a commission to get their dollars. So the dollar's really not worth the same as our dollars. So what sounds like is going to be an advantage to us turned out to be a great disadvantage to us because the way the governments, the foreign governments, and especially the European governments, dealt with this is that they would put tariffs on American goods. They would say, American businessmen, if you want to sell goods in Europe, if you want to sell goods in Britain or Italy or Germany, you have to pay a tax to get your car into Germany, because otherwise, we won't, you'll be underselling our manufacturers, and we won't be able to survive. We won't be able to do it. We have to make sure that your costs in bringing these cars in here, that it costs you so that it balances out the amount of money. We need to make a profit. That's what they're saying. We need to make a profit. So the bottom line is that with all of these tariffs and trade blocks and everything, that this is the reason that the European nations have put up all of these taxes and tariffs and hindrances that make American manufacturers, that make it so expensive for American manufacturers to do business, to have their factories here in America and sell overseas in the global market. The other nations made it very expensive because to sell overseas, the other nations put a tax on them for their own citizens, okay? The result of it being, in other words, they want their own citizens to buy their product. It became, I hope I'm doing this okay. The bottom line is that it became cheaper for American citizens to buy foreign goods, okay? And it cost so much money for American manufacturers to sell overseas, okay, that the American manufacturers closed up shop and moved their factories and their places of business to Europe. And they took all of the American jobs with them. Okay. So I'm going to try and keep this without making it too technical, okay? That's what tariffs are all about. Okay? And that's why we lost all the jobs in this country. Okay? And I'll never forget that they blasted it all over the TV right after Obama was elected. Some black man saying to Obama, "Oh, thank God you were elected. When are the jobs coming back?" And Obama said, "The jobs aren't coming back." Well, what's your answer? The jobs aren't coming back. Well, you can all go on welfare. That was his answer. I was horrified at the time. I didn't understand any of this. But let me say it again. American manufacturers and businessmen largely moved their businesses, including Donald Trump, to other countries because it was too expensive to do business here, okay, pay the taxes to America, and then when they try to move their products overseas to pay the taxes overseas, they couldn't make a profit. So they moved their businesses to Europe and they took all the jobs with them. And what caused it was that the European nations were trying to make a profit when they had to pay to buy dollars. Am I making any sense at all?
Mm.
Am I?
Yeah, but I am having a little bit of a hard time.
Yeah. Okay. So do you understand the reserve currency? What a reserve currency is?
Yeah.
That dollars became the reserve currency. All the other nations had to buy dollars. So that means our bank, the Federal Reserve, were collecting lira and yen and pounds and giving out dollars and getting a commission on it. Okay. So the dollar was worth less to the people overseas than it was worth to us here.
Okay.
And in order to correct that, the European nations put taxes on our manufacturers bringing their goods into their country. The whole purpose was that they needed to make a profit. And it wasn't maniacal, it wasn't evil, it wasn't trying to destroy the United States, but they needed to make a profit. So in the meantime, all of our businessmen couldn't make a profit, okay, because of the European nations equalizing the cost so that they would stay solvent. Can you deal with that? Okay. In the meantime, we have this Federal Reserve Bank that is really a global bank. It's not a friend of the United States. It's a global bank. They're doing what's best for themselves. And when Andrew Jackson shut them down, he called them a den of thieves. He said, I've been watching you, and I noticed that when the exchange is good, you take your commission, and when the exchange is bad, when the economic situation goes downhill, you cry bankruptcy, and the American taxpayer pays for it. That's what happened in 2008. The American taxpayer bailed out Goldman Sachs. So there has risen up a class of businessmen in the whole world, in America and in Russia and all that, and they're called oligarchs. We now have, some say we now have an oligarchic form of government. What is an oligarch? An oligarchic form of government is a government that's run by a group of people, a group of people, unelected people. So we have these very wealthy businessmen that have risen up since World War II because of this linking together. What happened was all of the European nations after World War II linked their economies together with the dollar as the global reserve system. And have been doing business, And so you may have noticed, if you're old enough to have noticed it, products from all over the world coming into this country, even in the supermarkets, products from all over the world. It's now a global economy, which has had unexpected results, such as American businesses moving out of America because it didn't work out for us, and all of these jobs being lost. And the solution to that problem being the welfare state. So you go on welfare. It's destroyed our culture. It's been a whole disaster, and I don't know how much of it was an accident. A lot of it was orchestrated. So we've come to the point in this country right now. We owe about $20 trillion. Who do we owe it to? The Federal Reserve. And the banks, not only the Federal Reserve, the central banks of all the European countries, we owe them money. What does that mean? They have our dollars. They have $1 million. Dollar bills, paper. Called fiat currency because it's worthless, because President Nixon ended the gold standard. It used to be that dollar was worth something. Now it's just a piece of paper. So all of these central banks in Europe can say, well, we want our gold. I have $1 million of paper money, and it says right on the paper, that this is an IOU. I want my gold. And I remember hearing, not too long ago, that one nation was asking for their gold back. I didn't really just know what it meant. Well, we don't have that kind of gold to pay them back. We can't even pay back the Federal Reserve, who we owe all this money to. Our nation owes money to the Federal Reserve, which is a private corporation. So I don't want to get into any more complicated than that, because I may not be able to explain it to you. But can that hold you?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. So does anybody else have a question? Can that hold you? Is that good enough? Okay. So we owe $20 trillion to central banks all over the world, okay, that we cannot pay, and we owe interest to our own Federal Reserve that is so high that that's all that we can pay every year is the interest. We will never pay off the debt. So what happens? When you're just a single person or a small business? What happens when you can't pay your debt? You go bankrupt. If if you're required, if you owe more than you're earning, or you owe more than your business is making for you, you go out of business, you go bankrupt. So America is going bankrupt. We're going, if we were an automobile, we're going on fumes. Because all of the money that we use as exchange no longer has a gold backing. It's called fiat money. It no longer has a gold backing. So if the other nations stop doing business with us, our economy will collapse. Because we're on a Ponzi scheme now. It's just paper money going back and forth and everybody's fine, okay? But if some of these nations out there say, well, this isn't really any good, and we think we're going to leave the dollar and go do business with someone else, then our economy will collapse. And I'm not going to even try to explain it any better. Maybe it'll come out as I read the articles to you. But that's what we're facing. And Russia and China have started another currency on the blockchain system. And a lot of nations are starting to reject the dollar, which means we're in danger of our economy collapsing. Now, President Trump is trying to stop that by renegotiating deals with all these other countries and telling them we have to start making money too. We're bankrupt because of this global reserve currency, and it can't continue. Yeah. So he's renegotiating these contracts, and nations all over the world are considering going elsewhere. Now, the problem is, and rather this is a very, very surface explanation that I'm giving you, it's very disappointing, brethren, but apparently our nation has come into the hands of our governmental criminals, and they've done a lot of wrong things in the world. I remember a few years ago, I heard something about the American Empire, and I said, in my naivety, I said, well, America, we don't have an empire. We don't go out and go to war and take land, and we gave Germany back their land, we gave Japan back their land. Well, but then we have an economic empire. Why do we have troops all over the world? The first time I heard that we had troops in Africa, I said, what are we having troops in Africa for? We're all over the world, and we have an economic empire. We're exerting influence all over the world for selfish purposes. Now, excuse me, you know what happens to me, my mind goes every once in a while, hold on a second. Yes, so we have interests all over the world, and what we have done is exercise authority, from what I understand, ungodly authority over other nations, because the dollar is the global reserve currency. It gives us power over other people, other nations. So our unscrupulous, it's not the American people, it's the people we elected, though, so God holds us responsible. We've elected some not so good people. What they do is they put sanctions on other nations. And you might have heard, I've heard all about these sanctions. I didn't understand what it was. What kind of sanctions? Sanctions on Iran, sanctions on Russia. What do you mean sanctions? Well, we don't like what you're doing, so we're not going to sell you American dollars. Now, the American dollar is tied by international agreement to the price of gas, the price of oil, the price of oil over in the Middle East and wherever oil is being harvested. You can only buy it with the American dollars. So if you're Italy or you're China and you want to buy oil from one of the Arabic nations, you have no choice, even if the other country said, I'll take your Chinese yen. You can't do it. You have to change your Chinese yen into dollars and go buy oil with the United States dollar. It's called the petrodollar. You have to use the dollars to buy oil. See? So that's what's happening with Europe and Iran right now. Okay? We put sanctions on Iran because we say Iran is doing, I don't know what to believe anymore. Iran's, that they're trying to make an atom bomb. So we want you to make an agreement with us that you're not going to make an atom bomb, and we're not going to let anyone buy your oil, Iran, until you agree to our terms. Are those terms godly or not? That's not a part of this message. I just want you to know what's going on. We put sanctions on Iran because we don't like what you're doing with the atomic material. We think you're making an atomic bomb. So we have sanctions on you, okay? And no one in Europe can buy oil from you because we have sanctions on you. So we're hurting Iran financially. But wintertime is coming, and Europe needs oil to heat their houses. So the European nations are saying to Trump, we're going to defy the sanctions. We're going to buy oil from Iran anyway. And Trump came back and said to them, you do that, and I will cut off your ability to exchange, this is the best way I can explain, I will cut off your ability to exchange your currency. There's a system. It's called the SWIFT system. It's a system by which the world currencies exchange. That's the best I can tell you. It's like saying this telephone wouldn't work if we didn't have an Optimum here or an AT&T here, okay? And so if I want to make a phone call in this area that I live in, I only have AT&T or Optimum. And it would be like the government saying to me, you cannot use AT&T or Optimum. You can't use the phone. You can't use the SWIFT system to do your world business. Economies have to keep going every day. Well, you need to be doing business every day so that food comes in, so that commerce comes in, so that the country runs. Trump said, you defy our sanctions on Iran, and we are going to cut off the SWIFT system from you. You will not be able to do business. So what does this mean? It means that now, today, in 2018, there's another system. And Russia started this other system because of American sanctions on Russia. Now, are the sanctions on Russia legitimate or not? That's not today's discussion. But apparently we have sanctions on Russia. Brethren, you need to understand that this is an incredible chess game, and that there are a lot of people in our government that are globalists, and they're not Americans. They're not doing what's best for America. They're doing what's best for a global economy. Why are they doing what's best for a global economy? Because they're either the oligarchs or they're getting money from these rich businessmen that are actually controlling our government today. So we have sanctions on Russia. And Russia said, I think your sanctions are wrong. I think that you have no right to be punishing us. We didn't do anything wrong. And we're going to start our own system. So Russia and China got together and started their own system, which runs on blockchain technology. And this blockchain technology is superior to the technology of the SWIFT system. And more countries are going to Russia to be their clearinghouse for world financial business. So, what is the result of this going to be? Some say Trump wants it to happen. What's going to happen? The SWIFT system will collapse. What happens if the SWIFT system collapses? Okay? The Federal Reserve Bank collapses. The Federal Reserve Bank is the bank that we owe all this money to that we can't pay back. It's like saying the criminal guy that you owe money to that's going to beat you up and break your legs if you don't pay them back. You know? And you owe all this money and you can never pay him back. Well, you go and you shoot him and he's dead, and now you don't have to worry about him. You don't pay him back anymore. So Trump is playing a dangerous game. He's trying to save the country, and he's playing a very dangerous game. And he wants the Federal Reserve Bank to be destroyed. The result of that will be a reset. This is what the reset is all about. If you've been hearing about this reset of the American dollar. So Trump, it appears to economic experts, and that's what this TRIFFIN dilemma is all about. Economic experts around the world are recognizing that President Trump appears to be trying to solve the dilemma of the TRIFFIN, solve the TRIFFIN dilemma. The TRIFFIN dilemma is that we've gotten into all of this trouble, that we can never pay back the Federal Reserve. We've been trapped by these interest-bearing central banks, and usury is a terrible crime, brethren. Being in debt is a terrible thing to do to yourself, and psychological and social forces that encourage you to live off a credit card. It's absolutely anti-scriptural to owe debt, to owe money. Absolutely anti-scriptural. God says, don't do it. Live on what you earn. You get into debt, and eventually you're going to hang yourself. So that's what's happened. It happens on a personal level. It's happened to us on a national level. We're stuck. The loan shark has got us, and is about to do. And America was being destroyed until President Trump was elected. We were being sold down the river by the oligarchs and the rich people and the corporations in this country. And they were all prepared to make China the next great economic center of the world. I told Hillary it was all set up to move to China, and that we were going to become a third world country. That was the plan, after we were robbed blind of all of our wealth. So President Trump trying to, the only way, so the next step along this TRIFFIN dilemma, there are steps, okay? And we've now descended to the next to the last step, which is what is the last step? Is war. Every time in the past that countries have been in a similar condition, they go to war because war, you make money, okay? Your manufacturers start making weapons, and then there are jobs for the people, and a war gets you out of economic debt. So that's what you're hearing when you say we're just one step away from World War III. That's what's going on. It has to do with the economic condition of the world, and in particular the US dollar has reached a crisis. So instead of going to war, President Trump is trying to destroy the Federal Reserve Bank. So it's only for people that can understand what he's doing. He's not saying it openly. He wants the European nations to stop using the SWIFT system. The SWIFT system is the system of the Federal Reserve Bank. He wants them to stop using SWIFT and go to the Russians. And then the Federal Reserve Bank will collapse. And the collapse of the Federal Reserve System will cancel our debt. And we can reset the dollar. So economic pundits across the world are noticing President Trump is starting to push us back on the gold standard. We have to be back on the gold standard, brethren. The gold standard is the equivalent of the individual living on what you earn, living within your means. That's the national equivalent of that, is the gold standard. If the dollar is worth so much money, that's all that it's worth. It's worth that much gold. You have to be back on the gold standard. So it looks like the President Trump is setting up the chessboard, to destroy the Federal Reserve Bank, put them out of business, which will cancel our debt. Then he will, and he's slowly putting us back on the reserve standard. That's what it looks like to the pundits, and that is what's called solving the TRIFFIN dilemma. The TRIFFIN dilemma says that there are several stages, and we're at the last stage where the only thing that's going to save us is to start World War III. So rather than go to World War III, President Trump is destroying the central bank, resetting the United States dollar. So back to the gold standard. Yeah. How's that going to affect everybody? It will be tumultuous times, but it'll work out for the best in the end. The more money you have, the more danger you're in. There'll be a reset. Your money is worthless. The dollars we have now, it's worthless. There's nothing behind it. It's fiat money. It's monopoly money. That's what it is. So this reset is coming. And what does that mean? It means that whatever you have that you don't own, brethren, if your house is not paid off, you don't own your house. If your car is not paid off, you don't own your car. So there may be some repossessions coming. I don't know. But it has to happen. Something has to happen. Either it's going to be World War III or a reset of the dollar. And President Trump is doing the best he can to make a soft landing, but there will be loss. So I'm just here to explain to you what's happening. What's happening from the world standards. We have a right to know what's happening, and this is just very surface. What I'm telling you is just very surface. The business dealings from country to country are so intrinsic. It's just beyond my brain, you know. And all of these people, they're running the world. So we have millions of everyday people just trying to run their family and send their kids to college, and we're being manipulated and social engineered and mind controlled. It's just disgusting. But what President Trump is doing is breaking the American empire, which we shouldn't have an empire. Why do we have an empire? So that's what he's doing. He's pulling us back to a form of isolationism. It's gotten out of control. Does anybody have any questions at this point? So we'll just take a deeper look at this now and see what I didn't get to you with my exhortation. We'll just start with the definition of the TRIFFIN dilemma. That's Exhibit 1. We'll take a look at that. The TRIFFIN dilemma, or the TRIFFIN paradox, is the conflict of economic interests that arises between short-term domestic needs, the needs of our country, and long-term international objectives for countries whose currencies serve as global reserve currencies. So they made the dollar the global reserve currency, which serves the world. So when decisions are made with regard to that currency, will they be decisions that will benefit America, or will they be decisions that will benefit the world? Because we are America, but our currency is the currency of the world. So there's a conflict when we have to make a decision. Are we going to do what's best for America or what's best for the world? And our government and these rich people in the country have become globalists. They want to do what's best for the world because that's where all their money is. And America has been on the sacrificial block. The TRIFFIN dilemma, or the TRIFFIN paradox, is the conflict of economic interests that arise between short-term domestic needs of the country and long-term international objectives for countries whose currencies serve as global reserve currencies. And our government has been making the decisions that benefit the global market. And the global market largely involved, the people we're doing business with is the European Union. So at the end of World War II, the Germany and France and England, they all gave up their own currencies and they started using the euro. So they have a European Congress, an unelected Congress that's in Brussels, that doesn't represent the people, that's oppressing all of the nations. It's an unelected Congress that's a tyrannical with Nazi overtones Congress that's running Europe, and we're doing business with them, and our businessmen are involved with those businessmen. It's a disgusting morass and a mess. So we're in an economic war. America is in an economic war with Europe. And now there's a world court over in The Hague, and there's the European Parliament, and the vitriol is severe because what President Trump is doing is he's overthrowing the whole system. If he doesn't overthrow the whole system, America will become a third world country. So President Trump is a patriot. Has he set out to destroy the world economy? No, he set out to save America. But it's going to rip apart the whole system that's been running since World War II. And the conflict is between making a decision that's best for the country or the decision that's best for the global market. So our government is filled with with elected people that are supposed to be representing us, that are not representing us. They're making the decisions that are best for the global market, because that's where their money is. And it's not just us, but the peoples all over the world, and the peoples all over Europe anyway, are being oppressed just like we are by these global oligarchs. That there's how much money do you need? It's all a power play. And as I said earlier, they're forcing the social engineering and this mind control. They're manipulating the man in the street. They're controlling the jobs. And I've told you this many times, they've done away with almost a whole category of people that earn their money as being shopkeepers. And now everything, the ideal jobs or the desirable jobs are working for these big corporations. And actually, people that analyze this situation will tell you that the people working for these big corporations, that they're actually slaves on plantation. You're subject to these higher powers that control you, whether they'll give you health care, whether they won't give you health care, what they'll pay you, what they won't pay you. They send you all over the world to different offices. They've broken up the family. It's been a disaster. It's been a social disaster and an economic disaster since World War II. We didn't win World War II. World War II has destroyed us. It's going to be very interesting to see how the Lord's going to put this back together again. Because the families have been decimated, all because of money, education and money. Give you the good job, go over and work in Thailand, this one's working in China, this one's working, the family's in New York, they're working in San Francisco. They've busted up the family through money and prestige. So I'm going to try it again. The TRIFFIN dilemma, or the TRIFFIN paradox, is the conflict of economic interests that arises between short-term domestic needs and long-term international objectives for countries whose currencies serve as global reserve currencies. That's our dollar. This dilemma, because what's happened is what has happened to us, what I just explained to you. Then we need a reserve of dollars because people are buying our dollars. And the Reserve Bank charges us interest. So we owe all this money to the Federal Reserve that we can never pay back. It turned out to be a disaster. And when we stand up for our rights and try to start making a living again, so to speak, the European Union is all against us. Because it has to affect them. Then their living, their mode of life is going to go down. It's just a mess. People, brethren, something's coming and it's going to hurt. So we have to believe that God's going to take care of us, but He doesn't want anything coming as a shock. See? So this dilemma was identified in the 1960s by Belgian-American economist Robert TRIFFIN, who pointed out that the country whose currency, being the global reserve currency, that's us, foreign nations, who pointed out that the country whose currency, being the global reserve currency by foreign nations, was to hold, must be willing to supply the world, that's our dollar, we must be willing to supply the world with an extra supply of dollars or currency to fulfill world demand for those foreign exchange reserves, thus leading a trade deficit. And that was what I explained to you, a trade deficit. Our dollar is worth $1. The dollar over there is worth less because they had to pay an exchange commission, a trade deficit. The use of a national currency, such as the US dollar, as a global reserve currency, leads to tension between its national and global monetary policy. Our own country has a conflict between its national and global policy. This is reflected in fundamental imbalances in the balance of payments, specifically the current account, as some goals require an outflow of dollars from the United States, while others require an inflow. We have to make decisions on what's going to affect the inflow or the outflow. Specifically, the TRIFFIN dilemma is usually cited to articulate the problems with the role of the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency under the Bretton Woods system. So the Bretton Woods system was what was developed after World War II. All of the nations of Europe and the United States made an agreement at this Bretton Woods meeting. John Maynard Keynes had anticipated this difficulty and had advocated the use of a global reserve currency called Bancor, something other than the dollar. And I'm just going to tell you that they rejected that. I don't want to get too technical for you. In the wake of the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008, the governor of the People's Bank of China explicitly named the reserve currency status of the U.S. dollar as a contributing factor to global savings and investment imbalances that led to the crisis. As such, the TRIFFIN dilemma is related to the global savings glut hypothesis, because the dollar's reserve currency role exacerbates the U.S. current account deficit due to the problem is due to the heightened demand for dollars. The problem is due to the heightened demand for dollars, okay? And this exchange and central banks getting the interest, etc., etc. So that's all I'm going to read from this exhibit. You can read the rest if you want. On page 2, it explains the Bretton Woods situation and the balance of payments. I think what we'll look at next is my notes, because the notes that I wrote as I was studying this topic to share with you, these are the notes that I wrote. So let's take a look at this. It says Message 935, Part 1. 935, Part 1. Now, those words up there, though he slay me, that was a note to get that scripture for you for my testimony, so just ignore that. Okay, so this was a note to myself, define reserve currency. I think I explained that to you without giving you, actually I think you have a printout on that. Reserve currency. I think one of the exhibits was reserve currency. Look at here. I remember seeing that, exhibit 1, exhibit 3. Did you give me that exhibit 2? It's missing again. 1, exhibit 2, here it is, reserve currency. I'll just read you the definition from the first page of reserve currency, and you can study the details yourself. Reserve currency, or anchor currency, is a currency, a form of money, really, that is held in significant quantities by governments and institutions, like the Federal Reserve Bank, as part of their foreign exchange services. As I explained to you, the Federal Reserve Bank has all of these dollars because all these other countries are coming and saying, here, I want to buy dollars. So they are holding on to our money, okay? The reserve currency is commonly used in international transactions, international investments, and all aspects of the global economy. It is often considered a hard currency or a safe haven currency. The dollar is safe. People who live in a country that issues a reserve currency can purchase imports and borrow across borders more cheaply than people in other nations because they do not need to exchange their currency to do so. So I explained that to you already. Okay. The country that has to buy dollars, okay, has to distribute it to their citizens at a worth that's less than the dollar for the Americans because we already have the money. We don't have to do any exchange. So you can read more up on that if you want to. My notes. The TRIFFIN dilemma. Maybe this will help you a little bit before we actually read the article. The way they get U.S. dollars. This is how foreign nations get U.S. dollars. The companies that are exchanging their currency, because of the taxes and the way they set up the tax system, they force businesses of their own nation to sell their products at such a low price that the Americans buy the foreign product rather than the American product. So it turns out initially that we have the advantage because we don't have to exchange our currency, okay? So we should have a better deal. But the foreign nations say, well, no, that's going to hurt our economy. So we're going to put a tax on our products. We're going to put a tax on it, So we're going to put a tax on your products so that it turns out that let me read this again. Force the businesses of their own nation to sell their products at such a low price that Americans buy the foreign product rather than the American product. We should be getting, it should be cheaper for us because we don't have to discount the money. But the foreign governments, the tax structure on their businesses, they force their businesses to sell so cheap that even though we have the advantage of the reserve currency, Americans still buy the foreign product. And that's because of the manipulation of the foreign country. But they're just trying to survive because they have to pay the exchange rate, and they need to keep their economy going, so they're just trying to survive. So they set up the tax structure, and it's cheaper for their people, and that it's even cheaper for us, to buy the foreign product than to buy the product made here. And that was what eventually resulted in all of our companies, so many of our companies leaving this country and setting up business in the other countries. Does anybody not understand that? We should be able to have the advantage because we don't have to pay any exchange rate on the dollar, but that didn't happen. The other country put taxes on, created taxes so that their product would be cheaper for us to buy than the American product. It still sounds like I'm not expressing it right. Something's wrong in what I'm saying there. They force the businesses of their nation to sell their products at such a low price that the Americans buy the foreign product rather than the American product. And of course we put very high tax, our government has put very high taxes on manufacturers and businesses here, and the foreign governments put taxes on the American products over there so that the other nations can get the better deal. And so we are buying, Americans are buying more than we're selling. We're buying foreign goods more than we're selling American goods. That's a definition for going bankrupt. So the American companies have moved out to the other nations. The global corporations take their profits in American dollars to the central bank of their nation and exchange the dollars for the local currency. The results in the foreign corporations selling more to United States buyers than the consumers of the global nations buy from U.S. manufacturers. One mechanism by which foreign corporations undersell American manufacturers and producers is by placing high tariffs or high taxes on American goods being sold in their country. This is called a trade barrier, which is a lose-lose scenario for America that President Trump is now trying to correct. So the foreign product is cheaper for Americans to buy, and the domestic product is cheaper for the consumers of the foreign nation. This means that both the American and the foreign consumer get a better deal by abandoning American products and services and buying from the European and Asian nations. The technical term for this situation is called a trade deficit, and that's what President Trump has been talking about. In simple terms, American business and service providers cannot make a profit when operating their businesses and services from a United States location. This is the reason why so many businesses have left the United States and moved their companies to foreign nations, taking American jobs with them. The United States was in an economic freefall when President Trump took office because of trade deficits American industry and manufacturing were experiencing when doing business in America. These trade deficits forced them to move their corporate headquarters, factories, plants, and employment opportunities to foreign countries. It was either that or go out of business. The trade deficit, which resulted in the U.S. losing so many businesses, has resulted in the American economy spinning out of control because we buy more than we sell. Every citizen living on a budget knows that when you buy more than you sell or earn, you cannot pay your bills, and eventually you go bankrupt. The United States has avoided bankruptcy so far because the Federal Reserve Bank, the Central Bank of the United States, keeps printing money that is not backed by gold or any other substantial substance. This paper money is called fiat currency. It is worthless. And at least one of the nation that I know of has asked for its gold back. Other nations are no longer using the dollar as a global reserve currency. China, Russia, and Iran, for example, say they are going to stop using the dollar. And they're not just doing that arbitrarily. As I explained to you, it's much more complicated than that. Both Russia and Iran are trying to get out from under United States sanctions. So is that even ethical, using sanctions this way? I don't even know. After I got through this study, and I watched so many videos on it recently, I'm just giving you the surface of what I learned. I said to the Lord, how do I pray? What do I pray? I don't even know what to pray. So for now, all I have for you is this information. Whether the Lord will give us more information in the future, I don't know. As to how to pray. I think the only answer that I heard when I said to him this morning, Lord, what do I pray? You know, he said, for now, just know the truth, as you can understand it, to the degree that you can understand it. So that's what I'm sharing with you. It appears that our wonderful and great President Trump, who happens to be a financial genius, has a solution to the problem, i.e. a solution that's not World War III. The only solution to the problem is the gold standard being enacted to replace the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. In that event, the world banks would no longer have to accumulate US dollars, which in turn would eliminate all US deficits forever. Let me read that again. The only solution to the problem is the gold standard being enacted to replace the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. So is President Trump going to revalue the dollar, or is he going to get rid of the dollar completely and have another form of currency? I don't know. In that event, the world banks would no longer have to accumulate US dollars, which in turn would eliminate all US deficits forever. It's like going bankrupt, you just cancel the debt. This means that every dollar must be backed by gold, no more reserve currency, no more central banks, which are robbers and thieves. In economic terms, the name of the problem is the TRIFFIN dilemma. It appears that President Trump has a solution for the TRIFFIN dilemma, and the solution is to destroy the central banks. The problem with that, brethren, is that the central banks are owned by the deep state. The central banks are owned by these trillionaires and very rich businessmen. They don't want the central banks destroyed. Even they don't care that the central bank system is destroying America, is destroying the peoples of Europe. They don't care. They just want their money. They're our enemy. This war, this economic war, is as real as a shooting war, except that the man in the street can't understand it. A shooting war you can understand. They're shooting at you, you have to shoot back. This war is on such a high level that the average man in the street doesn't even know what hit him. I've been listening to for the last 24 hours, listening to a man that the Lord brought to me on the internet. The man is just brilliant. My head is just so full of him. My head is just so full of what I've been learning, is that my head is spinning. And among other things, it appears that, now I had heard that President Trump went back on his campaign policy, his campaign promises of foreign policy. And a lot of conservatives or independents didn't vote for him, for his candidates in this election. They just stayed home. They were so disappointed in his foreign policy, but I didn't really understand anything about that. Just I've heard things that I didn't know what to believe, you know. And I'm of the opinion right now that he did reverse his position. What was his position on foreign policy? That he would pull us out of all wars. He didn't pull us out of Afghanistan. He didn't pull us out of Syria, although I think they said that we just pulled out of Syria, I think. And he didn't get us out of wars like he said he would do. You know? Well, what happened? From what I hear, this is what I believe for now. That either he didn't think he would have enough money to win. You know, you really need money. He took money. You know. He said that at the beginning of his campaign. If I take their people's money, I'm owing to them. That was when he was running for the nomination. He used his own money to run for the nomination. Then when he actually ran in the presidential campaign, I guess he wasn't going to use any more of his money, and he took money. He took money from 3 rich men who are very pro-war, and they're the ones that are controlling the foreign policy of the United States, and it looks like it's true. And I said, I know, I really love President Trump, and I believe what he was thinking was if he didn't get elected, he couldn't do anything. So he took the money, and he now is compromised on foreign policy, but he's saving the country. And I believe that's what he's thinking. He's a patriot, he wants to save the country. But he's not keeping his promises on foreign policy, and I don't think he's doing what God wants him to do on foreign policy. So I said, Lord, how do I pray? How do I pray? I pray that the Lord help him. He doesn't want a war. He's not a war hawk. That's why when you hear that he hires certain people in the White House, like people that are war hawks or people that are not conservatives, why does he hire these people in the White House? Because he's taken millions of dollars from these rich people and they want their people in the White House. So he's walking on the head of a pin, trying to do the best for the country and the world while he's under the influence of these 3 rich people. So everything's a mess. The country's a mess, the world is a mess. High intrigue going on among the high places in these nations. What in the world is going to as the world spins out of control, as we descend into a social morass where judgment from God, we have to be threatened by judgment from God for what's happening socially and spiritually in the world. And all of the manipulation by the wealthy people that I've been hearing this last 24 hours, this man is just really fascinating. He's a historian. His knowledge is incredible. I have to understand he may not be right on everything, but a lot of what he's saying fits in with other things that I've learned, and I believe the Lord sent me to him. And I can't even say it's painful. At this point, it's not even painful anymore. It's like, Lord, what in the world? How are you going to get the world out of this trouble? How are you going to do this? What's coming next? But God has to be glorified, you see. He has to be glorified. So this is this little bit of information that I'm sharing with you now. And this little bit more of information that I've learned from listening to all these videos recently. I found this historian on the internet. You know, amazing man. He happens to be a Catholic intellect. He's a Catholic intellect. He's highly educated. And he's coming from a biblical perspective, although he's a Catholic. But he seems to me to be an honest man. And he's drawn a lot of right conclusions about what's happened to the country morally. He's very concerned about the moral fall of the country. Very interesting. I've really been educated. And I have a lot more videos to listen to, as the Lord lets me. So back to this. This year it has been noticed by economic experts that President Trump is moving the United States towards the gold standard. He's slowly, silently moving us back towards the gold standard. That means either he's getting ready to rearm the US dollar or to get rid of the dollar and put in a new currency when the Federal Reserve Bank collapses. But the deep state runs the Federal Reserve Bank. They don't want the Federal Reserve Bank to collapse. So they're trying to kill President Trump. He's destroying the American empire. He's destroying the central bank system. He is taking out the deep state, the ones that executed President Kennedy, because he wanted to shut down the Federal Reserve. They're criminals. They assassinate you if they can. But he has the American military with him, the patriots who are not willing to see the country destroyed. And that's what's going on. That's what the Civil War is in this country. I never understood it to this degree. I hope you understand it better from what I'm having to tell you today. It's all about the central banks that are owned by these global rich people. They don't owe an allegiance to any country. They just want power over the whole world. And they want a one-world government. And they want a one-world religion to keep the people pacified. They don't believe in God. They're Satanists, most of them. But they believe the average people. They don't think very much of us. They think we're just simple people that need a religion. So they want to give us a religion that will keep us satisfied. They don't understand. They're true Christians anyway. And this bringing Islam into the country and this whole transgender agenda, it's like a proxy army. These higher-ups, they're using these to destroy society so that they can weaken the people, so that we'll just accept what they want to do. They want a one-world government. They want to control everything. And they don't think much of us. Their control of the world will make us slaves. They want everybody to be equal. No creativity. And they're Satanists to boot, so it gets even worse. That's what we're up against. So the Lord Jesus will defeat them, but what kind of a culture we'll have when he starts to restore, I don't have any idea. And the CIA is deep in the pocket of the deep state. There's a complete divide in the country of national interests against global interests. American citizens who have global interests prefer to support global interests.
Hello, please enter your... Welcome to free conference. We will now connect you to your call. There are 2 attendees in this conference. The host has joined the conference.
The civil war, the cold civil war in this country is between the people that they have no alliance to America. They live here and they're citizens here and they're in our government. But their alliance is to the globe, to the world government. That's where their money is. They're becoming very wealthy. The CIA is with the deep state. The deep state is with the central banks. And up until President Trump was elected, the people had no voice. The whole country was moving, all of the government, the elected officials, or the majority of them, were moving the country to a total destruction because our government was making laws following for the benefit of the global community, which are these very rich men that don't care about the individual person at all. They just want to contain us and control us, and they're Satanists. So that's the war. President Trump is a patriot and a populist. The first voice that the people have had since all of this started. So as a result of this phenomenon, this year it has been noticed by economic experts that President Trump is moving the United States towards the gold standard and abolishing the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. This is called solving the TRIFFIN dilemma. The TRIFFIN dilemma, which says if we keep on going in the direction that we're going, the next step is World War III, nuclear holocaust. The result of the phenomenon has been the deindustrialization of the United States, i.e., we ceased to be a manufacturing nation until President Trump, of course, and became a consumer nation. Thousands, if not millions, of jobs left the United States, turning the United States largely into a welfare state all of which contributed to the breakdown of the scriptural standards of hard work and strong families, and all of the social problems that we now deal with, including runaway drug addiction and sexual immorality. I'm told 50% of the country is addicted in one way or another. Okay, brethren. Now, that was all to prepare you for the article that I found on the website called What Do You Know? And this is the website that I told you. They have very hard-hitting articles. I believe they largely speak the truth, although I did find one recent article which I felt was an exaggeration, which put my guard up. You know, this was the first thing that I found on that website. I want to be careful tonight. You can't put yourself 100% in any writer. You know, you have to run everything before the Lord and expect at any time to have to be disappointed in someone that you have confidence in. Jesus is the only one that we can have confidence in, and we need to know the truth. I keep asking him about putting food away and even buying gold. He's never told me to do any of that. I have a little extra food in the house. I don't have a lot of room. I have a little extra food in the house. I bought a little gold, you know, only a little bit. We have to trust the Lord. He never told me to do any of that, but I thought, well, I should buy some extra food. Why extra food? Brother, there's going to be a crisis. When, let's say it happens, it's going to happen what it looks like is happening. Okay? That President Trump is going to collapse the Federal Reserve Bank. That means the stock market's going to go crazy. That means the banks will probably close because there's going to be a currency crisis. If the banks close, that means it's going to stop all of the industry from, they bring in the food every day. Every day food comes into the country, comes to the stores, everything's going to stop. So the Lord's never told me to do anything, but sometimes you have to use your own intelligence. You should have some extra food in the house. You should have cash in the house if it'll be any good at all, because the banks will be closed. And you need staples like toilet paper and soap. You may not be able to buy anything. And your medications, you know, brethren, I unfortunately have to take medication. I take 3 medications, 2 blood pressure pills and something for my thyroid. And the insurance company will only refill your prescription when you have nothing left of the other prescription, maybe a week left. Well, I went out and I said to the pharmacist, can I buy a supply of that prescription myself? And she thought I was crazy. I think it came to $40 for my thyroid medication. I said, yes, I want to have, I think it's a 90-day supply. I want to have a 90-day supply of my medication on hand, rather than a 1-week supply. So, am I telling you to do it? I don't know. The Lord didn't tell me to do it. But I think sometimes we have to use our own intelligence. It can't hurt to have batteries in the house and extra food and some cash. And, by and large, our faith has to be in Jesus, but sometimes you have to do a little. You should have water in the house, extra water. What if the electricity goes out? Whether anything can happen. Yes, we believe Jesus to keep us, but anything can happen. And I've been saying this, I've been reading it, and I've been saying it to you for so long that you start to think it's like calling wolf. But apparently it's something has to happen. We owe $20 trillion that we can't pay back. And it looks like President Trump is crashing the Federal Reserve. Now, this, I don't fully understand this, but the Federal Reserve Bank, which is a private corporation, is a private corporation, but it exists by some kind of legislation that Congress passed. It authorized them to open their bank. And somehow, and I don't understand this, there is something called the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve. And I guess it's part of the deal. Our government passed legislation that says, okay, open your bank and do business in our country. But there will be a Board of Governors that will be appointed by the President of the United States. So I don't really understand how that works. But it's a private corporation that's printing our money. They print our money. They charge us interest. We owe them $20 trillion. And there's also a Board of Governors that runs the Federal Reserve private corporation that the President of the United States appoints. So I don't really understand that. But I know that previously, Ben Bernanke and Greenspan, whatever his first name was, I forgot his first name, that even though they were appointed by the United States President, their mindset was for the benefit of globalism. The mindset of the board that governs the private corporation called the Federal Reserve Bank were people appointed by the president whose best interest was towards globalism, the American empire, rather than domestic benefits. And I can't explain that any better than that. But today what's happening, because President Trump, he's called the Federal Reserve Bank his most serious enemy, and he's trying to destroy it. So somehow, there's supposed to be 9 people, I believe 9 people, on that Board of Governors, and there were only 3. So I don't know how President Trump got rid of those other 6, if I have the right number. So of the 3 governors that are on the board now, President Trump has appointed 2. So now they're President's Trump man, whose mindset is not globalist, but domestic. They're President's Trump man. Okay. And they expect him to appoint 2 more, so maybe it's not 9. They expect him to appoint 2 more, and then 2 more. So that's his total of 7. So that, what does that mean? It means President Trump's agents will be controlling the Federal Reserve Bank. What does that mean? That means when the European Union says to President Trump, we are going to defy your sanctions against Iran, and we are going to buy oil from Iran. And President Trump says, well, if you do that, I will not let you do business with the SWIFT system, okay, which is the system of the Federal Reserve Bank that holds all the dollars that you need to buy dollars from. And the way the system is set up, you can only buy oil with US dollars. I won't let you use the system if you do that. See? So the Europeans may decide to go buy from Russia through Russia's system, which is a blockchain system, which will crash the Federal Reserve. And when the Federal Reserve Bank crashes, it will cancel our debt. And then either President Trump will have another currency, gold back, or he'll somehow reactivate the American dollar. If you look at your $100 bills, I don't know if I ever talked to you about this or not, but if you look at your $100 bills, it's like 2 bills. It's different on the left than it is on the right. What are you talking about, Sheila? Well, President Trump, when this crisis happens, okay, it has to happen. We owe $20 trillion and we can't pay the bill. Okay. Now, whatever he's going to do with the money, if he decides to keep the dollar, all the smaller denominations might be worthless. But if you have any $100 bills, make sure you have a more recent $100 bill, because the right half of the dollar bill could be the gold-backed currency, could represent the gold-backed currency that President Trump is getting together. Now, President Trump is gathering gold. There's been a mad gold rush. Okay, China, Russia, and I think maybe Iran too, I'm not sure, have been buying up all the gold they could buy up. President Trump is getting gold by his executive order, okay, which he's going after all the pedophiles, which are these very rich businessmen, and confiscating all their funds. He's already confiscated millions of dollars of gold from the pedophiles. That's how he's getting the gold back for us. So how he's going to attach that gold? Is he going to attach that gold to the existing dollar, or will it be attached will only the $100 bills be valued? I don't know how it's going to work. Or is he going to get rid of the dollar completely and have a different currency? When that Federal Reserve Bank dies, America will start printing its own money, which America should have never stopped printing its own money. But then I don't know to what degree you're following me, but this is a principle that I've been teaching you for years. When God gives you power, when you have power over your own life, you give it away and you try and get it back. Don't give your power away, brethren. Any legitimate authority that you have, if you give it away, you're going to have one heck of a time trying to get it back if you can get it back. See? So that's the national state that we're in right now. We gave the authority of printing our own money. Our nation gave that privilege to a private bank, and they brought us into bondage through usury, which is the charging of interest. Is it evil? Is it an evil thing, charging interest? So you say, well, Sheila, people need to buy houses, they need to buy cars. Well, only 50, 60 years ago, people saved up their money before they bought anything. We're in an indebted nation now. We're completely violating scriptural laws. I've told you, my parents weren't rich. My father wanted his car. Well, they didn't buy that car until they paid right down to the last dollar. They never borrowed a dime. Every car my father ever bought, he paid cash for. So, well, you're stuck today. You need to have a mentality that wants to get out of debt. It's the way you think. If you understand this principle, God will get you out of debt. You save your money. Do you have a car now? Is your car paid off? From the minute you get your new car, you should start saving for the next one. You should start saving for the next one. Put away $5, $10, $15 a week, whatever. So that when you need a new car, when this car breaks down, you have the money for a car. That's how everybody lived until a few years ago. And then the banks came in and they've corrupted the whole nation. I remember when my daughter turned 18, she was getting all kinds of credit cards in the mail. I said, Maria, don't use the credit cards. She didn't want to listen to anybody. And she got into trouble. Oh, credit cards. Oh, okay, just, sure. They actually send the credit cards out in the mail to corrupt the people, to live beyond their means. Okay, so this is the article that started this whole thing on the What Do You Know website, right here from the November 9th article. So you look at it. Trump's solving of the TRIFFIN dilemma now has the world poised on the brink of a nuclear holocaust, because that's the only way to solve the debt, is to go to war, and we're so advanced in this world that war now will mean a nuclear holocaust, it will mean a nuclear war. An intriguing yet fearfully worded this first few lines, it just tells you that this comes out of Russia. This comes out of Russia's news media. Shows the Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova reacting with alarm to the United States' unannounced test launch of a nuclear multiple warhead capable Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile. Did you know that we did a nuclear test of an intercontinental ballistic missile? I didn't hear anything about it. Did anybody hear anything about it? No. Our news doesn't tell us anything. With a warning that Washington is playing with the devil as it seriously considers the concept of a limited nuclear war, a fear further voiced by French President Emmanuel Macron, who has just warned, and I heard on the news, but I didn't really know what it meant, that Europeans cannot be protected from America without a true European army. Macron said this to Trump when he was over there in Europe, and Trump got offended. I think he lashed back whatever he said to him, I don't recall. And those fearful words of warning are being made against the backdrop of the looming 2019 global economic crisis. Well, it was supposed to happen 20 years ago. Every year they say it's coming next year. Well, don't get so tired of the whole thing that you think it's never going to come. It has to come because we owe $20 trillion that we can't pay. That now has the entire world poised on the brink of an all-out nuclear holocaust. All of which is due to Trump attempting to solve the most intractable and existential threat his nation has ever faced, that is known as the TRIFFIN dilemma. America is facing the TRIFFIN dilemma. Our economy has so spiraled out of control that some would say the only solution is World War III. The TRIFFIN dilemma, and on page 2, it's expressed as a mathematical equation. I couldn't find any information on the mathematical equation, so I'm not going to comment on it because I don't understand it. So I'll just read the text. The TRIFFIN dilemma, inherent conflict of reserve currency countries' domestic policy with the international monetary order. If we stay with the international monetary order, we will be destroyed as a country. So there's a conflict between the well-being of this country and the international monetary order. Who's going to be destroyed? Our legislators were selling us out. Our president was selling us out. Okay, America will be destroyed. And all the rich people will be moving to China or putting their investments in other places. And the citizens of America would become the citizens of a third world country. But President Trump is a populist and a patriot. And he said, I'm not going to let that happen. So he's fighting back. He's unsettling the established international money order. And what's going to happen? Is there going to be a nuclear war? Is he going to succeed in getting rid of the Federal Reserve, which President Kennedy tried to do and was executed? And I'm told that George H. Bush, Papa Bush, tried to do the same thing, which I don't understand because George Bush is the deep state, so I don't understand that. But that's what I heard over these last few days, that George H.W. Bush tried to stop it and he only served one term. Now these men are so powerful, they defeated him. They defeated his second term. Most presidents get elected for a second term. So somebody raised up Ross Perot to start a third-party movement against President George H.W. Bush, and he was ousted. Under international gold standard means that gold is set at a certain amount, and then every nation's currency determines the value of its currency based upon the gold that it owns, the gold that it has in its possession. Under international gold standard, world monetary policy was counter-cyclical. That means there's no TRIFFIN dilemma, and here it is as a mathematical equation that I cannot explain to you. Any reserve currency system is unsustainable. The reserve currency system is unsustainable because reserves are bought and repayable in goods. In other words, we give you our dollars, okay, and they're translated into goods. So we have to keep printing more dollars. You give us your money, you take dollars, okay, but when we participate in the exchange, we don't get dollars back, we get goods back. And then the other countries come to us and say, we need more dollars because we want to sell America more goods. So we're printing, the Federal Reserve Bank is printing more and more dollars. Until it became unsustainable, we didn't have enough gold to back all of these dollars. So President Nixon ended the gold standard, continued to print the dollars, so that all of these countries could buy dollars from us, and then we would get goods. It wouldn't, so you had to keep printing more dollars. And that's how we got into trouble with the central bank. It's the best I can explain it. So we're told here, any reserve currency system is unsustainable because reserves are bought and repayable. I'm not exchanging dollar for dollar. I'm not saying to you, here, I'll give you $5, you give me 10. No, I'll give you $5 and you give me products. So we have to keep printing more dollars so that we can exchange dollars for products. It's unsustainable. What can a financial crisis lead to? Well, I don't understand this fully, but here are 5 stages, and we're told that we're at the end of the 4th stage, and the only way to go is nuclear war. The first stage says, I don't know if I can read this, but I mean, it's very small. It starts with people living beyond their means and taking on debt. Okay, that I understand. I don't know how you get to the next sentence. Wages become more. What's that word, Susan? Wages become more. Can you see what that word means? Distorted, maybe.
Distorted, it looks
Distorted, yeah. So the only thing I can make out of that is that people are living beyond their means. So they all, large numbers of people work for big companies. Now there are labor unions. They sort of force the wages up. Wages become distorted, meaning that the workers are really getting more than the job that they're doing calls for. Production costs escalate. And
industries move
offshore.
offshore.
Okay. So I can't read it, so you have to read that yourself. And the 4th stage is trade war. We're in the trade wars now because President Trump is fighting back. And the next step is a hot war. What does that mean? That there isn't enough dollars. There are not enough dollars for America to now. We've become a purchaser nation. We've become a consumer nation, but we don't have enough dollars to buy what we need because you're supposed to be buying from us and we buy from you, and it's exchange, you know. But we don't have. You keep buying our dollars for currency exchange purposes. So we don't have enough dollars to buy what we need from you, and we become a consumer nation because all of our businesses have left because they can't make any money doing business here in America. So a war starts, and it starts up the industrial military complex. We start making war machines, and that gives people jobs, and it jump starts the economy. So over the past in history, that's what's happened. There's all kinds of, brother, it's just been so interesting to hear other people's opinions about what started World War I and what started World War II. It's nothing at all about what you learned in school. You don't have to believe everything that you hear, but it's just really interesting to hear other opinions. You know, the victors write the history. I believe what I learned in school is all propaganda. What we've seen in the movies is all propaganda. Even if you don't believe it, just really, really interesting to hear what I've been hearing over these last months that the Lord has been bringing me to as I've been desiring truth. And it's not even painful anymore. Initially, it was very painful hearing things that would indicate that America might not have been doing the right thing. But I'm not even in pain anymore. I just really need to know the truth. I just really, really need to know the truth. And then little bits that I heard there, and little bits that I heard there, and little bits that I heard there, and that I'm hearing it in multiple places. And it's just, the truth is just terrible. The truth is just terrible. And what's going on in the world between powerful people that are running countries. It's just horrible. It's the fallen nature of man operating on a national and global level. So all of the evil that we see in ourselves and in other people, all of the motives that we see of jealousy and desire to dominate our fellow man, all of these evil qualities of the first Adam that we're dealing with today, recognizing it in other people, learning to deal with it in Christ so that we don't sin against them, dealing with it within ourselves. It's operating on higher and higher national and global levels, which start wars. And these powers start wars because they make a lot of money manufacturing war machines. And I've known for a long time that there are companies that sold to both sides of World War II. They sold to both sides, which means they didn't have any moral investment in who won the war. They just made money. They sold to both sides. They sold weapons to both sides. Go ahead, kill each other. I'm making money. Go kill each other. It's horrible. Jesus is going to show up. Why is it taking him so long to show up? Because he has a plan as to how he will show up, and it will be no other way. And the way that he's going to show up is through people that he has caused to ascend into his nature. He is going to bring forth a company of people that have a righteous nature that would never ever do things like this. Do things like what? Like start wars and that fund, give weapons to both sides just because you're making money and say, go ahead, kill each other. He's going to appear in humanity in a company of people that have a righteous nature that will actually do things for the benefit of humanity. Put an end to all of this nightmare of wars and killed people and coming back from Afghanistan with no legs and no arms. For what? For what? So Jesus is going to do it his way. And this devastation will continue until this company of men stands up. And then, even then, how is he going to do it? Is he going to put his people in Washington? Or is he going to bring down the whole government of the United States and raise up a theocracy? I don't know how he's going to do it. But the world will continue in its evil ways. And we're better off isolationists because when fallen Adam gets together in large numbers, the strong evil ones rise to the top and bad things happen. So as long as men are still fallen, it's better to stay in small groups. Church denominations are not good. Stay in small groups. Let God deal with the group through a single leader. Okay? Don't come under denomination rules. That's the beginning of globalism in the church. It's a disaster. Until this company of men with the righteous nature of God rise up. And then everything will be set in order. And the correction to Adam's fall will be accomplished. That's the bottom line.
Amen.
So American people are kept blinded to the reality that World War III may be just months away. Well, our people are certainly kept in the dark about just about everything. I've been listening to this man. You want to know what his name is? His name is E. Michael Jones. Incredible speaker. You may not believe everything that he says, and he may not be right about everything that he says, but he's passionate. He's a passionate man. He's a Catholic man, Catholic intellect, and he's distressed over what's happened to the Catholic Church, and he believes that the Catholic Church used to be the preserver of the morality of society. Has a lot of very interesting things to say. I was shocked to find him on the internet and to see how many lectures he has, and to see that YouTube hasn't shut him down. I don't know why they haven't shut him down. Fascinating. Really been educated. So we're on page 3 here, brother. According to this report, yet being kept from the knowledge of the American people, is that the entire economic system of the United States is built upon a fantasy mirage due to what is known as the TRIFFIN dilemma. We're in a mirage. Okay? This prosperity that's here today, it's an illusion because the money is worthless. And we owe $20 trillion. And these other countries that we owe the money to, brethren, these countries that have purchased American dollars, If they all say, okay, we want to turn it in, give us the gold that it's worth, we can't pay them. It's an economic collapse. We owe money to central banks all over Europe and the world. So we're built on a fantasy mirage due to what is known as the TRIFFIN dilemma, which sees the US dollar being the only global reserve currency required by all the world's central bank as reserves. Only our currency. With the only one way that these central banks can obtain US dollar reserves being they are forced to undersell all US producers in order to be able to sell more to the US than they buy from the US, whose unexpected result has been the deindustrialization of the United States as the world geared up to undersell all US producers wherever they could do so in order to obtain the indispensable US dollar, the valuable US dollar. They bankrupted us. The system has bankrupted us. It sounded good. We're going to be the world currency. We're going to be in charge of the whole world economic system. And it turned out to bite us. And now we're going bankrupt. The underselling of U.S. producers in order to obtain U.S. dollars, this report explains, has taken many forms, most often in nations placing high tariffs on American-made goods and services that are known as trade barriers, that has seen American manufacturers and service creators having to abandon the United States if they were to survive. That in turn created for the United States what is known as trade deficits, and as predicted by the immutable mathematical logic of the TRIFFIN dilemma, the result of it is, American manufacturers have had to abandon the United States because they couldn't afford to do business here. That in turn created for the U.S. what is known as a trade deficit, where we're buying more from you than we're selling. We're buying more from you than we're selling to you. And as predicted by this mathematical economic equation called the TRIFFIN dilemma, the result of the fact that we're buying more from you than you're buying from us, and we're going into bankruptcy, now sees the United States spiraling economically out of control. If I spend more than I earn, I'm going to economically spiral out of control. That's what's happening. And seeing as national debt needed to make up for these trade deficits has made it bankrupt. We have a trade deficit. We're buying more than we're selling you. And this is the chart to whatever degree you can understand it. I'm on page 4. The only way to protect the United States from bankruptcy, this report details, is for it to solve the TRIFFIN dilemma. You have to stop from going into a nuclear war. That solving the TRIFFIN dilemma is to find a way to not go to nuclear war. And whose only cure for it is the gold standard being enacted to replace the U.S. dollar. Live within your means. Stop printing money that has no gold behind it because you don't have enough dollars. You don't have enough dollars because the other nations are buying U.S. dollars and hoarding them. So the only cure is for the gold standard being enacted to replace the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. That would then see the world's central banks no longer having to accumulate U.S. dollars. The U.S. banks accumulate U.S. dollars to sell them to foreign nations. So if we go back on the reserve currency, they won't have to do that anymore because the gold standard does away with the reserve currency model, which in turn would eliminate all U.S. trade deficits forever. So our only way out of bankruptcy, brethren, is to go to war and beef up the industrial complex, which makes money for the nation, or get rid of the central banks. And to get rid of the central banks, then you no longer have any means by which to do international business other than actually sending each other gold nuggets. Except that Russia has set up its own system. And Gaddafi had set up his own system and they killed him. That was the reason for the attack on Libya. During this past year, this report notes, American economic experts began to notice that President Trump was indeed moving the United States towards the gold standard and his abolishing of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. With multi-billionaire Mexican business magnate Hugo Salinas Price being one of the first to notice that Trump was solving the TRIFFIN dilemma. By moving America back to the gold standard, he's doing it quietly and silently. How is he doing that? He's accumulating all of this gold by taking it back from all these pedophiles. He's declaring these pedophiles criminals and confiscating their money. See, before this, we didn't have the option of going back on the gold standard because we didn't have enough gold to do it. So he's found a way to get gold reserves into the country. And the noted American financial guru Jay Taylor, noticing what was occurring too, and who quickly told his clients, there is a method to Donald Trump's seemingly mad economic and geopolitical policies, including tariffs and the reversal of the Iranian nuclear deal that Obama orchestrated. The TRIFFIN's dilemma not only explains Trump's political success and the reasons for his policies, but that we may be nearing a massive tectonic shift in global markets as a result. Global markets. They run every day. Food comes into the country every day. Goods come into the countries all over the world every day. When the currency exchange breaks down, commerce will stop moving. That's why you need extra food in the house. And that's why they might close the banks temporarily until they get everything readjusted. So the whole world is in trouble, and it's all in President Trump's hands. Now, I heard in all of my listening this past couple of days that the war in Syria is over. I really hope it's true. I didn't read anything about it anywhere. I know there was a crisis in Syria, and President Trump drew a red line that there could have been war between Russia and America, and that he sent in the Kurdish troops, and that saved that situation. I didn't hear anything about the war in Syria being over. I really hope that it's true. So we've been told a lot of lies about the leaders of other countries, and what I'm told is part of the, well, there were two major reasons why we failed. Thank God we failed in Syria. Well, we were in war with a proxy army. ISIS was set up by the CIA and President Obama and Hillary. ISIS was created by the CIA. So we were by proxy in war in Syria. And we did bomb a couple of times. Apparently, there were lies about President Assad bombing his own people with chemical weapons. Such lies going on is just horrible. You know? But what was different about President Assad was that apparently it's a civil war. It was a civil war in Syria. But the civil war really was between the people that lived there and then these foreigners, this ISIS that came in. It wasn't really a civil war. Because the people loved, you know, whether in some countries they prosper with dictators. Everybody's not prepared for democracy. And apparently, well, Gaddafi was beloved by the people. And now apparently Assad was beloved by the people. He is a non-radical Muslim that gave freedom of religion to Jews and Christians and Catholics and Muslims. Everyone lived in peace in Syria. So when the war settled down, a lot of Syrian refugees were going back to Syria, saying they preferred to live in Syria. They didn't want to be refugees. They were just running from the war. So it sort of proved that he was a good dictator. People liked him. They wanted to go back to their own countries. And somehow, and of course Russia stepped in Russia and Iran were going to defend Syria. So I didn't hear anything about it. In the American news, even the news that I listened to on the internet, I didn't hear anything about the Syrian war being over. I sure hope that it's true. I just heard this from this man, E. Michael Jones. He just said it casually. He has a very intense conversation. There's a lot of information. You have to really listen carefully to what he's saying. So on page 5, to the massive tectonic shift occurring due to President Trump solving the TRIFFIN dilemma by returning the United States to the gold standard, just now being noticed by these experts, this report continues, has been known about since Trump took office by every nation in the world. What is she saying? Every nation in the world should have known that President Trump was going to do this. From the day he took office, he gave a signal to anyone that could understand it that he intended to return the nation to the gold standard. How would they know this? Let me read it to you here. And this is the reason why Russia and China have been furiously buying up all the gold they can. They knew what President Trump was doing, as well as every other nation in the world buying as much gold as they can too. Now I heard about that also, but I didn't know what it meant. With Russia being the best prepared for what is to come, after tripling its gold reserves as it prepares for full-scale economic war with the US dollar. To how the world was able to know that President Trump was preparing to solve the TRIFFIN dilemma, this report explains, was telegraphed by Trump himself on the first day he took office, and was when he walked reporters into his White House Oval Office, where predominantly displayed behind his desk was the portrait of President Andrew Jackson, the slave-owning founder of the Democrat Party, whose candidate, Hillary Clinton, he had just defeated. President Andrew Jackson. That was a message to anybody that could understand it. Not because of President Jackson being a slave owner or Democrat Party founder did President Trump order his portrait hung behind the White Oval Office desk, this report details, but because of the symbolism it showed to the entire world of what he was going to do. He was going to destroy the central banking Federal Reserve System in the United States, whose survival depends on the TRIFFIN dilemma. Because the activities of the Federal Reserve Bank is that it robs the entire world of its wealth for the benefit of American, European, globalist elites. And is exactly what Jackson has done over a century prior to Trump taking office. President Trump shut down the central bank. President Jackson shut down the central bank. But a powerful businessman opened up another one secretly in the future. And this is what President Jackson's statement was to the central bank. I've had men watching you for a long time, and I'm convinced that you have used the funds of the bank to speculate in the breadstuffs of the country. You've used the funds of the bank to make investments and speculate on the benefit and the wealth of this nation. You were gambling. Speculation is gambling. When you won, you divided the profits amongst you. You didn't share it with the country or the people of the country. You divided the profits amongst yourself. And when you lost, you charged it to the bank, which is sustained by American taxpayers. You are a den of vipers and thieves. President Andrew Jackson, 1834, on closing the second bank of the United States. The Federal Reserve, and that's exactly what happened in the 2008-2009 crisis. Goldman Sachs was bailed out with American tax dollars. When they lose, the tax dollars pays. When they win, they take all the wealth of the country and people get nothing. Not only do the people get nothing, they're sucking the life out of the country. The Federal Reserve central banking system that controls the economic life of the United States and accumulates its massive wealth via the TRIFFIN dilemma, this report notes, is not a part of the U.S. government, but exists by an act of Congress, and whose Board of Governors is an independent U.S. government agency. Independent U.S. government agency where the members are appointed by the president. And the Federal Reserve banks themselves being private corporations. So I don't really understand that, as I told you. It exists as an act of Congress, and whose Board of Governors is an independent U.S. government agency. So the U.S. government agency governs the bank, which is a private corporation. So I don't get that. To how powerful the private banking Federal Reserve has become, this report says, is best exampled by their having President John F. Kennedy publicly executed when he tried to shut them down in 1963. President Lyndon B. Johnson having to physically assault Federal Reserve Chairman William McChesney Martin Jr., and I don't know anything about that, and President George Herbert Walker Bush threatening to destroy them, but whom the Federal Reserve quickly removed from office, replacing him with President Bill Clinton. So the Federal Reserve private bank had the power to remove George Herbert Walker Bush from office. The only thing I can tell you about that is that they raised up Ross Perot to run as a third-party candidate, and President George Herbert Walker Bush didn't have the votes to win. Since its founding in 1913, under the administration of President Woodrow Wilson, however, this report further notes, no American leader has been more poised or qualified or more prepared to take on and destroy the Federal Reserve than President Trump. This Federal Reserve Bank, it's like the loan shark. It's the loan shark that won't let you off. All you can do is afford to pay him his interest, and then you still owe him the money, and he comes and threatens to break your legs. No American leader has been more poised to take on and destroy the Federal Reserve than President Trump, as the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve is required to have 7 members, not 9, 7, I was wrong, is required by the Act of Congress to have 7 members. It has 3, 2 of whom were put in their position by President Trump. 2 more have been nominated by Trump and are awaiting confirmation by the U.S. Senate. So President Trump is president for 2 years, and he can't get his nominees through the Senate because they're blocking his nominees. But now that he has control of the Senate, he's going to push through these nominees, a lot of judges that need to be nominated. His agenda will move forward now that the Republicans have taken control of the Senate. And after these 2 are put on the Board of Governors, Trump will then nominate 2 more to follow them, meaning in essence that 6 of the 7 Board of Governors members will have been put into place by Trump. So I honestly don't know how that works, how a government agency Board of Governors controls a private corporation. They control them, yet they can't stop them from driving us into the drink with interest. And I'm just giving you the surface of it because I don't understand it myself. Woodrow Wilson, quoting Woodrow Wilson, "Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacturing are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere, so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. It's a criminal cabal that are operating through our economic system that has taken the world, and they've taken this country. With President Trump having called the Federal Reserve my greatest threat and is having declared war against them, this report continues, the European-based globalist-aligned International Monetary Fund came quickly to the defense of the Federal Reserve. So there are central banks all over the world. So the International Monetary Fund came quickly to the defense of the Federal Reserve. I don't know how. That Trump quickly retaliated against by denying the European sanctions, sanctions waivers for their purchase of Iranian oil. So we have these sanctions on Iran, okay? I told you earlier, because we supposedly want them to sign an agreement that they will not make an atomic bomb, and they refuse, so we have economic sanctions on them. But the Europeans say we're going to defy your sanctions, okay? And we're going to buy oil from them anyway. You can't make us do that. And Trump fired back, telling them, and Trump responded to that threat by telling the Europeans that if they defy his sanctions, he will cut them off from the global banking system, SWIFT. That's the global banking system by which we send money. I remember at one point one of the brethren from out of the country wanted to send some money to us by wire transfer, and we had to get some SWIFT. I remember that was the first time I heard the name SWIFT. Do you remember that, Susan? We had to get, what is the SWIFT system? I don't know. They had to go through the SWIFT system to get money from one country into this country. And that SWIFT system is a part of our Federal Reserve private banking system that has a board of governors that's a national agency. So I don't understand that. But anyway, they can't do business. President Trump said, if you defy our sanctions and you buy oil from Iran, we will deny you the use of the SWIFT system. And the SWIFT system requires, you can only buy oil with the dollar. That's the way the government, the global government is set up. It's called the petrodollar. You can only buy oil with the American dollar. Well, if you can't use the SWIFT system, you can't buy oil. So if you're going to defy the sanctions, which you have the power to do, I will take it into my hands and deny you the exchange mechanism, so now you can't do it because I'm forcing you not to do it. If you don't do it voluntarily, if you don't honor the sanctions voluntarily, I'll cut you off by force. You will not buy oil from Iran, President Trump has said to them. The Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications System, used by the Federal Reserve to maintain their TRIFFIN dilemma. So the Federal Reserve has caused this dilemma by hoarding dollars, which forced us to ask them to print more money, which eventually made us go off the gold standard, which I don't think President Nixon should have done that. He should have done his best to fix it at that time, but either he didn't know how, or he couldn't, or he wasn't strong enough to do it. Okay? So this problem that we're in, it's the loan shark, the Federal Reserve Bank loan shark, that has gotten us into this trouble. But of course, we borrowed the money in the first place. We entered into this. We took on being the global reserve currency in the first place. I think probably thinking it was an advantage for ourselves. And it turned around and bit us. That means it was wrong in the first place. From what I understand, our government did a lot of wrong things at the end of World War II, including taking thousands of German scientists over here and making them citizens. So let me read the sentence again. The Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications System, used by the Federal Reserve to maintain their TRIFFIN dilemma global hegemonic scheme to rob the world blind, while at the same time setting up needless conflicts among nations to keep themselves in power, this report explains, is President Trump's main target for destruction. with SWIFT knowing this fact and buckling under Trump by keeping the Europeans from being able to pay for Iranian oil. In other words, the Federal Reserve Bank did what President Trump told them. He said, don't you let them use the SWIFT system. And it says that they buckled under him. Well, he's in control of their board of governors. I don't know what that means, but apparently it resulted in them buckling under him. I don't know what the board of governors does. I'm on page 9. The great dilemma the Europeans are now left in, this report says, is that unless they choose to watch their economies grind to a halt and their homes and businesses freeze this winter, they will be forced to buy Iranian oil through Russia's alternative to the SWIFT, known as the System for Transfer of Financial Messages, SPFS. That's the Russian system. That runs on impregnable, you cannot hack it, blockchain technology, and whose number of users of around the globe are now greater than those using SWIFT. And the picture in the middle of the page says, Russia's central bank governor touts Moscow alternative to SWIFT transfer system as protection from U.S. sanctions. Russia devised it to get out from under U.S. sanctions. Are we right in placing these sanctions? I don't even know. But what I see is that when we agreed, when the decision was made that the dollar would be the U.S. reserve currency, I don't think that I hope there was no intention to use it as sanctions. It was a means of global commerce. It was a means of global commerce. Now all of a sudden we're using it to control what you do. If we don't like what you're doing, we use this global currency to put sanctions on you. It doesn't sound right to me, but what do I know? I'm just one of the slaves here. That I'm just getting a cursory introduction to this from the Lord. I mean, this is way over my head. But it doesn't sound right to me. It sounds to me like it's not being used for the purpose that it was implemented. With Russia's superior SPFS bank messaging system being immune from all American sanctions of any kind or against any nation, this report concludes, its further benefit to President Trump is it's not allowing any financial transaction to be made in U.S. dollars. That's what President Trump says, you can't use the SWIFT. That means you can't make any transaction using U.S. dollars. That the private Federal Reserve Bank cannot survive without, as its petrodollar system is what undergirds the entire TRIFFIN dilemma scheme. So, when President Trump says you can't use the SWIFT system, you won't be able to use U.S. dollars to buy anything. You have to use other currency. Okay? That underrides the Federal Reserve System. The petrodollar means you can buy oil only with the U.S. dollar. It's called the petrodollar. This is going to hurt the Federal Reserve Bank. Let me read you the whole sentence. That the private Federal Reserve Bank cannot survive without its petrodollar system, which is the SWIFT system. So President Trump is punishing the Europeans and is going to wind up destroying the Federal Reserve Bank. Well, a couple of people, a couple of economic geniuses on two sides of the world looked at what's going on and said, does President Trump really not know what he's doing when he threatens when he's threatening the Europeans with regard to Iranian oil? Does he really not know that there's a secondary and a hidden, a not obvious result of what he's doing? That it's going to destroy the Federal Reserve System. Maybe that's what he intended to do the whole time. That's what this article is all about. So let me give you the whole sentence. With Russia's superior SPFS bank messaging system being immune from all American sanctions of any kind or against any nation, this report concludes its further benefit to President Trump is it's not allowing any financial transaction to be made in U.S. dollars, that the private Federal Reserve Bank cannot survive without its petrodollar system, is what undergirds its entire TRIFFIN dilemma scheme, making nations having to have U.S. dollars before they can buy any oil. And in whose collapse, when the Federal Reserve collapses, would see Trump having to place his nation on the gold standard, because the Federal Reserve Bank collapses. The only way to do business, to do global business, would be to exchange gold or gold-backed notes, which would immediately wipe out all of his nation's trade deficits. When you shoot the loan shark, you don't owe them any money anymore. When the loan shark goes out of business, you don't owe them any money anymore. With his only then having to decide on how to pay off his nation's debt to those globalist Federal Reserve bankers. See, he cannot pay off the globalists. He cannot pay off the globalists of the other world banks, because all the money that we have goes to paying the interest to the Federal Reserve Bank, and then we don't have anything left over. So if the Federal Reserve goes bust, if you shoot the loan shark, we don't owe the interest to the Federal Reserve Bank anymore. And then President Trump brings out his gold-backed currency and pays off the banks. The $20 trillion is owed to the central banks of the other nations that are holding our dollars. I have my dollar. Here's your dollar. Give me my gold. You know, we can't afford it, because every dollar that we have is going to pay the interest of the Federal Reserve. And that no one would be surprised to see him doing this by having his U.S. Treasury. See, the U.S. Treasury hasn't minted anything in a long time, because we turned that job over to the Federal Reserve Bank. Don't give your power away, brethren. Don't ever give your power away. Sometimes you're tired, things look hard. Don't give your power away. See? So it wouldn't surprise anybody if President Trump minted 1 trillion platinum coins to pay off his debt, and as President Obama once actually contemplated doing. And I doubt very much that they made up this image. I would imagine that that image exists in the federal government as a possibility. Or maybe they did make it up. I don't know. So I guess we would have the platinum to do it. So that seems to be the case, that we would have the money. We have the money to pay off the banks, but we can't do it because all we can afford is the interest to the Federal Reserve, to the loan shark. So rather than go to war to kickstart our economy, President Trump is trying to assassinate the loan shark. That's it. That's the whole article. So I read this article, and I actually read it a couple of weeks ago. It's dated November 9th. And I said, wow, I really have to share this with the brethren. But I didn't understand it well enough to teach it. So it's taken me a couple of weeks. I wanted to preach it last week, and I wasn't ready. I think I did a fairly decent job. I think I've given you some information, not as all. I didn't give you as much information as is available, but I think I gave you enough to give you an idea of what's going on in the country and in the world today. I think it was the best that I could do. And I don't know what to pray for President Trump. I'm very sad to hear that he took the money apparently from, and I think this must be true. He took money from 3 rich capitalists, oligarchs, and now he has not kept his campaign promises on his on his international policy, and the question is, how is he going to balance his pro-America domestic policy with an international policy that's globalist? That the experts are saying that he really can't do it. So I don't know what's going to happen there, but I know that God is with him. I know that God is with him. And the question was asked in this lecture, well, what would have happened if Trump didn't take their money? And the answer was, We'll never know. So I found that this Catholic intellect, I found him to be a very passionate, honest man. I didn't see him in any way defending the Catholic Church to defend the Catholic Church. He seemed to be honest in every, at least he believed. He believed, coming from a spirit of righteousness, and he quoted the scripture multiple times. He, as a man, tried to be a righteous Christian, you know. He didn't defend the Catholic Church when they were wrong. And he just has these fascinating opinions and this fascinating amount of information as to what's going on in the world, a lot of which I've heard bits of it elsewhere. So, what he has to say makes a lot of things make sense. Just fascinating experience. I expect to listen to every one of his lectures as I have time to do it. Fascinating man. So, that's the story. President Trump appears to have a globalist agenda with regard to his the international policy, and a domestic agenda with regard to domestic policy. And the two, I'm told that they will eventually contradict with each other, that it doesn't work. You have to have either an all-globalist policy, both, in other words, you choose the globalist, you make decisions that will benefit globalism, which hurt the domestic policy, or you make decisions that will help America and will hurt the globalist policy. So how can you be going one way on your international policy and another way on your domestic policy? And that's what he's doing. I personally think that he's hoping that he knows what he did, and he did it. He took the money because he thought if he didn't win, he wouldn't be able to do anything for America at all. And then he's trying to maneuver. He doesn't want a war. He's not a war hawk. He really doesn't want a war. And he's really trying he thinks that he has a hope of working this out by making deals with world leaders like Putin. And that's why the press attacked him so badly after he met with Putin. It made no sense at all, you know. They wanted to know. I was there. I saw the reporters questioning him, like, well, did you tell Putin off when you met with him? Did you tell Putin off? Well, no diplomatic meeting. You don't tell people off when you have a diplomatic meeting, when you have an international meeting. You go to try to make peace. What are these crazy reporters talking about? You know, because they were afraid that he would make a deal with Putin, a deal that would benefit the country and destroy the globalist agenda. So there are these very wealthy people they're already billionaires, they're becoming trillionaires, and they want to keep that globalist agenda. But Trump is destroying it. Yet, in his international policy, he's not destroying it. So I think that he has the hopes of maneuvering out of it by making business deals, by saying to all these nations, look, we'll both make money. I have an idea. We'll both make money. It'll be fair. Let's get out of this mess so that we don't need a world war, that we don't need conflicts. But I don't know, but he may be in trouble. So I've just asked the Lord to help him, because he took the money. Would he have won without the money? We'll never know. We'll never know if he would have won without the money. And I remember when he was running for the nomination, and he was really being very crude and vicious against the other nominees. I remember him saying, but I have to win. I have to do what I have to. If I don't get the nomination, I can't win. He really wants to help the country, so I see that he's in trouble right now with the international policy. And I pray that God helps him and that he does everything that God tells him to do and God wants him to do, and that somehow this works out. But the bottom line is that the world today is being run by businessmen and the multinational corporations, that they're more powerful than the governments of the nations. It's the major problem that the world is in today. So I hope I've left you with some more information that you had before you tuned in today. And I just know the truth will set us free, that this is the spiritual rule, the more people that know the truth, that somehow, if you know the truth without condemnation, I'm still very pro-President Trump. I'm very pro-President Trump. I'm still behind him. I'm sorry that things didn't work out, that he could have fully implemented his program, that he wouldn't have needed the money, but the man's doing the best that he can. I think his heart's in the right place. And God can work with that. So, but our trust is in Jesus. And the bottom line is that our trust is in Jesus, and the whole world is dancing on the head of a pin with some very rich, powerful people that don't care about that actually despise the man in the street. They think we're just cattle. They don't care about us at all. And as I said, many of them are Satanists. So it really is the end of the ages, brethren. When I read in the scripture years ago that the whole world lieth in wickedness, I never in my wildest dreams had any idea what that could have meant. But I have faith in Jesus Christ. I trust Jesus Christ. And I trust this message that he's given us. I believe everything will be okay. But that doesn't mean we may not go through some tough times. So education will set you free. Knowing what's going on will help to overcome any anxiety or concerns or fears. We understand what's happening. Okay? If we wake up one morning and we find out that the banks are closed, we know what's going on, we know what it's all about. There's going to be a new currency. Okay? And we trust Jesus and everything will be okay. That's all that I can tell you. Evil people are in control of the world. And I just thank God for the information. And does anyone have anything they'd like to say? If you have a question, I'll try to answer you if I can.